Welcome back. So today, what I want to do, I don't want to dive into any specific feature or how things work. I just want to kind of click through several of the different screens, some of the menu bars, kind of generally what they mean, so you kind of understand what's happening when you're doing stuff. Okay. And hopefully, if you forget where something's at, this will be a good refresher video for you to go back and say, hey, where was that when he said set this playback or playback control? Or where was the database at? Or how did I get to training? Things like that. You'll be able to kind of come back here and do a quick review. So the first thing is, if we don't even go into any of the screens, uh, if you notice, here's where you log in. Here is your database control, which we will click in a little bit. And this is where you store playback defenses. This is where if you have admin privileges, you can save defenses and then you can play them back later. We'll talk more about that later. Then you have calibrate. So if you hit the calibrate button, as you can see, the rods are going to calibrate. Now, they're always going to move out away from the device, and then they're going to go in and back out. So just be expecting that to happen if you do hit the calibrate button. Right here is where your training view is. This is where you go to training. As everything you're watching right now will be added to this help button right here. When you click the help button, it's going to pull up a private YouTube account that's going to allow you to see it, like the video you're watching today. That's where you click to get to it. And here's foosball training, and we'll go in more into that later. But just an example, we're still adding stuff to this, so there's only a few things in it right now. Like I put the rollover in it and the stick pass, working on the brush pass and the pull shot and stuff like that. But for instance, if you were to click on, say, 3-row, and then you can pick your shot type, you can say, I want to practice my rollover. It's going to pull up a little video. It's going to do a little intro. Hey, there's the rollover, deadliest shot in foosball, blah, 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 blah. It'll have some resources that have been scanned and pulled from YouTube or other sources. This is like some Ryan Napton videos and some Unreal Foods, Zeke Foods. So, and you can watch those. Some pro tips. This is a pro tip by Billy Pappas. And then you've got lessons. Now, this is kind of the meat of why we're here, right? So when you go to here, you can click on different things. Like you can say pull, push, pull, straight, standard defense, and you click load, right? When you hit load, as you can see, it just loaded something. So this is where you start getting, this is the meat of the playback software and the different lessons. So you got time the bobbing hole, hit the open hole. And you got a bunch of lessons here. You got hit between several open holes and different lessons. So we won't go into this now. Just know that this is here. And I'll just close all this out. And then this offline button, it's more for use when you're not connected or your FoosFits are not on, but you want to go into the configuration screens or you want to work with your database and you don't want to have the FoosFits turned on. You can actually override them. If you click the offline button, it's going to allow you to go into these screens. Otherwise, without that offline, you can't go into the configure screen. But right now we're actually connected, so it's going to let me anyway. Now, from this window, it's always going to start in manual mode. That's just the default. Manual mode is where you do things like just bobbing back and forth, or you just do random motions. So here's where you start the device. So here you go. It's currently in shuffle. So see, it's just shuffling back and forth. And then if you switched it to say, so if you switch it to, this is random mode. This is where it's going to do kind of random movements. Now watch. It's kind of hard to tell on the webcam that it's not just shuffling. So, and then here's your options. So if you had set up a defense, some kind of bobbing or random or whatever it is you want, you can actually store your favorites here. So you just give the defense a name, you call it whatever you want, Greg's whatever amazing defense, and you hit create new, and then it'll become part of the list here. All the ones that say system is because they're system defenses. And you'll see later, these are the ones that are attached to the lessons. But if you create any of your own, you're going to see them at the bottom there. Anytime you log in as you will only see your defenses and the system defenses. Obviously, you're not going to see anybody else's defenses. So you just create a new one. And then if you make any changes to a defense, like let's say you pull one of them up, you select one and you pull up a previous one, you're like, oh, you know what? I like it to be a little faster. You can change anything you want in these settings and then hit save and it'll update that defense. Okay. Now we'll talk more about PID later. PID is, it's a tuning parameter or calibration parameter. You see it in drones, airplanes, race car, these little, little remote control race cars and stuff. It's a very common thing. Cruise control, everything has PID in it. So you rarely will have to set these. However, occasionally on the playback, you might have to tweak it a little bit just to get the devices to line up exactly where they need to be. Okay. Now, the other thing is if you switch the mode, if you watch, the menus change a little bit, because now, as you see, the other ones went away because things that don't apply go away. Now, if you click on the options, it's a different window. You see that? So when you're in practice mode, you have this window because now you're doing like a timing thing. You're doing a practice thing. This feature works different than the manual. Obviously, we're not going to go into all the details of that right now, but just know that same thing though, is if you set up a practice defense of your own and you don't want to use one of the system defined ones, you can just give it a name, set your settings. Now, what a lot of people like to do is pull one of the system ones up that they like and then modify it and give it its own name or the name you want and then save it. So that way it's sort of like a little subset of the system one. And then it also has a PID settings. You can see the numbers are different because each feature has different software and the FoosFit device, it's working a little bit differently. Some of them are using different algorithms to detect movement and stuff like that. So they all have their own style of PID settings and stuff. And then you have the playback feature. Playback mode activated. You have what's called the playback control window. This window is where it's kind of like an MP3 player. Whenever you pull up any defenses to play or you want to record any defenses, this is the window you're going to be in. You have manual input, and we'll talk about a little about this in a second. If you want to pull up an existing defense that is either that you own or that the system owns and you want to play it, right? There's two ways to do it. Most people are actually going to go to the training lessons, right? They're going to click on rollover. Let's say they're going to go to lessons. They're going to pick, say, like pattern recognition. I'm picking that one because I know that that one's used in playback. There's nothing that says that any of the other ones can't use playback or different features. It's just that I created the lessons, so I know which ones are going to do what. So when you go to here and you say, I want a standard defense pattern recognition, if I hit load defense, it says playback mode activated, defense loaded 191, right? So if I come back here and I go to the playback control, look at that. The defenses are loaded. So that's how you load a defense. That's one way. And that's probably the most common for most people because unless you've created your own, that's probably where you're going to go to get your defenses to play. And then you would click here. It actually loads it to the FoosFit device. And then you hit play and it's going to start playing the defense. Okay. Now, the other way to load a defense is to go to the options window. It's different now. You see that? So every time you change modes, that option window changes to match the feature mode you're in. This one's a little more complicated. I have a Johnny test here because I was actually working with Johnny on creating a defense. So here's where you can filter out. So if there's a bunch of defenses and maybe you created, 100 defenses and they have different categories, right? Like stick pass, brush pass, chip pass, whatever, or lesson type. Is it pattern recognition, right? Or whatever. So you can filter stuff out. You can say, I only want to see stick passes, right? But anyway, for now, they're all set to all. You can click say like on Johnny test, and look, it pulls down things that are defined under that event, and then you hit load. And then if you come back here to the playback control window, you can see it's loaded. See that? So it's going to override whatever's there, and it's going to load the new stuff you asked for. Now we're not going to talk about the render just because it's something that's still a work in progress. This is the one where, I mean, I'll tell you briefly what it does, but it's currently, it's just a button. It doesn't. This actually does do something, but that doesn't have the back stuff that it needs to work. But this is where you watch a real match. It records all the defenses using sensors, and then you come here and you render it using these buttons. You're basically subdividing all the defenses up, each 10 or 15-second defense, all of Tony's defenses, all of Ryan's, whoever's playing the match. And then all that gets ported into the database, and then it gives you access to play those defenses. So we won't really talk about that right now. It's a really cool feature though. It will be coming in the future. And then once again, you have your PID. So 90% of the time, this KP is what you're going to change. Okay. I'm just letting you know that now. You're never going to have to change these. You might adjust it 1 or 2 clicks up or 1 or 2 clicks down, and usually that's enough to get what you need. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the playback feature. So the database control, if you notice, you see this window, see how it looks? See where it says load attempts? Well, when you click database control and you click attempts here, it looks very, very similar, right? Because that is intentional. I wanted it to have the same look and feel, so it made sense, not having to learn 2 different interfaces to do the same thing. The difference, though, is when you're in the database, you're no longer trying to load defenses, you're trying to edit defenses. So if you wanted to edit the Johnny defense, you'd come here, click on it, and now you say edit. See, now it pulls up that defense. It's loading it right now. It's going to fill all that data in. You hit search, and boom, there's that defense. This is the actual defense that you saw loaded in that playback control window. So this is the defense. If you wanted to save it or modify it, you'd come here. If you wanted to record a defense, you would come here and pull it from the manual window. We'll talk about all that stuff later, but this is where you control, store, and kind of manage your defenses. If you wanted to create another attempt, you would come here and say add attempt. Boom. Now you have 2 attempts under this criteria, right? And that's it. And as you can see, like there's no data here because there's no defense against it. But if you had one, you'd add it here, goalie, 2-rod, whatever, hit save, and it's going to save that defense. All right. So we're not going to talk about how to kind of manage all this right now. I just wanted to walk through the screens with you. I think we've done that. We've walked through the menu screens. We went through the little training window here. Database control, calibrate, kind of hit everything. One other little note that's kind of just helpful is that I realized early on as I was doing my own testing that, if I'm in the playback control and I'm doing something and I want to run a new lesson, I didn't want to come up here and have to muddle through every time and go roll over, stick pass, and like, oh man, I was on that lesson. I just want to go right back to it, right? And maybe go to the next one. So I made it such that, if you're on a lesson, say like lesson 58 here, and you're in beginner mode, if you hit the X right here, it just closes it. It doesn't completely wipe it out. So if you come back here, boom, you see you're right back where you started. It doesn't seem like a big deal until you're having to click 10 times to get to the same thing. It gets pretty annoying. So now you can come right back and say, oh, now I want to load this lesson, right? Then you just close it. So it loads it. You see playback loaded 197. Boom. You go do your thing. You see they're all loaded. You practice for a little while, come back, right? So that's the intention. We're going to talk more about the training. We'll dive into the details of each feature later. But that's all I wanted to show you today. Good luck and have fun.